Hello, my friends. Thank you for joining us today for what promises to be a totally awesome sauce Edpuzzle live workshop event about making writing. Our chat is open, so while you're settling in, please take a second to tell everyone a little bit about yourself, like what subject and grade levels you teach and where you're from. I'm Stephanie from the Edpuzzle community team, and I have two co-hosts today. I have Manny Curiel and the very lovely and talented Tony Taylor.
Hello.
So go ahead, say hi.
Well, I am Manny, community, but you need to hear about Tony's story.
I am a teacher at Aurora High School, and I have senior English, creative writing, and exploring popular literature. And I am so excited for today's session to learn some ideas and get some ideas that I can use in my classroom.
And Tony, I never imagined in a million years back in the 90s that we would be doing something like this together. Why don't you also tell everyone our connection? She's frozen.
She's thinking about it.
She's thinking she's like, do I want to tell people how we're connected? Yeah, go ahead, Tony.
All right. I had Stephanie as my freshman and sophomore English teacher, and she is really the reason that I'm doing what I'm doing. I loved having her, and I loved how she made students feel and love of literature and writing and reading in her class. So here I am.
That's amazing. I'm like, oh, I taught first grade, so my kids are really young. But oh,
I know. Thank you, Tony. That's like seriously. Now we've recorded it for posterity, so that's awesome. So Tony, let's welcome who we're here to see, not just us, Angela Stockman, who we are super excited to learn from today. Yes. Angela was the lead in our Twitter chat 3 weeks back. So if you're on Twitter, you can search for her little wisdom nuggets by using the chat, from that chat, using the hashtag EdPuzzleReads.
Yeah, Angela is a teacher, an author, an international literacy consultant with a passion for making and writing. She spent over a decade teaching writing workshops in her own classroom before stepping out to support other teachers, which I'm truly looking forward to, and the writers that they love. She spends most weekdays working besides them in their own classroom, which would be a hit in Aurora. And she has spends a lot of summers helping teachers as well. She has making writing pop-up studio sessions for all K through 12th graders, students and interested educators who are interested in what she has the knowledge that she can share. And you may find her on the web at angelastockman.com, on Twitter at Angela Stockman, or on the web at angelastockman.com.
Awesome. Angela, yes, thank you. Since I'm a former writing teacher and Tony's a current one, you definitely have a receptive audience on your end.
We have a lot in common. I was going to tell Tony before that I'm teaching advanced composition this year. Oh, wow. And so our students are kind of close in age. Mine are just a little bit more experienced, I think, than yours are. So it was good to hear that when we were warming up a bit.
Yeah. You have a lot to share for me.
Yes.
That was quite an introduction. Let's get a crack-a-lackin'.
So we'd like to just welcome off to Angela. And Angela, if you wouldn't mind explaining for our audience before we get started what the term making writing means. And then you go ahead.
Yeah, I'm often asked that question. The title of that book, people really like it. Make Writing sounds catchy and interesting and fun. And really what it has to do with is multimodal composition. And the idea that writing is far bigger than print. And we tend to privilege print inside of our K-12 schools especially. And there's a history there that's important to explore. But when we talk about making writing, we're talking about the fact that all writing really is a form of expression that calls us to use more than written words, that writing is gesture, and writing is actually the construction of things that are very visual, that are oral, and we can hear them, right? Writing is vibration as well. So when you think about how your phone even makes different sorts of vibrations depending on the alerts that it's sending you. And you can tell who might be contacting you based on those notifications and how they feel even, right? Yeah, that vibration and that is a form of expression that's very closely associated with writing as well. So multimodal composition honors the fact that things like infographics are writing, videos are writing. What we're doing here today, we required a lot of writing. We may not see a lot of print on the screen behind this experience that you're offering everyone today, but there was a lot of writing behind the design, right? It just lives on the design room floor. So making writing is about owning the fact that it's our responsibility to sharpen that saw and help writers and designers do the same thing in our writing workshops. That when we invite multimodality, when we invite writing that is bigger than print, we actually honor the whole of how human beings or who human beings are and how they really have always expressed themselves.
Wow.
You never think of, no one really thinks, we always think about writing as formulaic, but writing can actually be a piece of art. And especially now with the technology that we have today, like you said, it could be anything and I think that we too often with students just see it as a class. I'm going to have to go do it in just my English class or my writing class. And it's not necessarily something that I will be doing in all of my classes when I'm creating.
Yeah, I think there are important cultural implications there as well. And when I wrote MakeWriting, I wasn't aware of them. The beautiful thing about being an author is that once your work goes out into the world, lots of people start to pay attention to it, interpret it, and use it in their own world, and they contact you. And you learn more from your audience. And so shortly after I published MakeWriting, many people started using these ideas in their own classrooms. And I was really honest in that book about the fact that it was pretty experimental at that time. I don't feel that way anymore. I learned a lot. I have since that book was written about cultural archetypes and the difference between people who come from communal cultures and individual cultures, and neurological differences that are cultural as well. And it's really important for us to understand that as writing teachers and to also interrogate our racial history, especially in the West, because it's had a huge impact on how schools were created and how writing workshops were created and who they were created for. There's a lot that needs undoing there. And a part of that is about bringing multimodal composition into our classrooms. I said in MakeWriting that I felt very much that making was an invitation and not necessarily something that we would require. I feel very differently about that now, especially since COVID, because I've learned that because I didn't make it my responsibility to teach multimodal composition explicitly, it put some of my students at a deficit, especially those that I thought were gifted writers because they were very comfortable producing print. But in this particular world that we're living in, if you do not know how to translate print into a multimodal form, your work is not going to be as influential. And so that's where all of this comes from. And it's why I'm so passionate about it.
So multimodal means, taking it out into different forms.
Yes, and making sure you're using different modes of expression. So for instance, a video is a multimodal composition because while there may be written words behind it in the form of a script, there's a video here. There's orality involved, there's visuals involved, there's gesture that is being used to help communicate the message that we're sharing today. And so that makes it multimodal and not just based in print.
Okay. I like Christine's question, and I know we want to get to actually your presentation part of this, but I also want to remind our audience, like Christine, is just type your questions in the chat. I'll try to address them either, during or after. If you are evangelizing this event on social media, please don't forget to use the hashtag Edpuzzle Live. And yeah, if you could address that question, Angela, before you get started.
Yeah, I think I could not agree more. One of the things that was really frustrating for me, Christine, when I first published MakeWriting, people would start sharing pictures from their classrooms and their practice of students using loose parts and all sorts of really beautiful materials. And it was pretty. And they would talk about how fun it was. And I think to some degree that undermines the greater importance of this work, in that the use of loose parts and the use of materials in multimodal expression actually fosters a level of critical thinking that we cannot reach when we only use written words alone. It's very metaphorical. It forces us to think in symbol and simile and metaphor. We don't have design chops typically as English language arts or English teachers either. We were not taught how to explicitly teach design. So for all of these reasons, I do find that this is incredibly difficult to teach, but I think that if we can begin with some very simple practices, students actually will carry it along for us if we're willing to be humbled by them a little bit, and to give some very specific sorts of invitations and follow their lead can be incredibly powerful.
Yeah. So checking our ego.
Yeah.
Checking our ego. Yeah. And Tony, you probably you have to give up control. Which is very difficult to do.
Yes.
I'm sure.
Right. And that's you have to think of like, what creative things can I put in the middle of this group or whatever, how they can then develop it, and then really like hands off. Yeah. And
we need structures, we need frames, and we need tools. Yeah. It's not a free for all. And I think that we're still in the beginning phases of figuring out what best practices look like for multimodal composition instruction, explicit instruction around that. And so to that end, I think it's really important that voices like mine are one of many. And I am constantly trying to widen the conversation and the circle and to elevate and amplify those who are doing this work, because we can't build single stories around this. It's far too complex. We need lots of voices and people sharing ideas here.
So for today, what will we be learning from you today?
Today, I'm going to share something very simple with all of you. It's called a fire starter. And fire starters are things that I offer usually at the beginning of a studio or writing workshop session where we're focusing on multimodal composition or making writing. A fire starter is typically aligned to whatever my learning target or teaching intention or teaching point might be. It is usually a very brief invitation to use materials to complete a challenge that's relevant to that particular target. I find that it feels very much like play for writers of all ages, but it's also an opportunity to engage them in some really critical thinking, and it removes a lot of the tensions or overwhelm or barriers, as Dan Ryder would speak to this. My friend Dan Ryder is huge inspiration around all of this work. And Dan always talks about scaling print barriers. That was his concept. Those are his words. And the use of materials, I find, in a fire starter, it's a very short period of time where we give writers materials to build around the concepts that we might be teaching into throughout the rest of the lesson. It removes the print barrier, allowing often the full complexity of their ideas to get put on the table. And the fact that we're using multimodality and different materials often generates ideas that they wouldn't have thought of anyway, because the materials are different and it evokes a different way of thinking about those things. So that's what I'm
saying. So
sharing.
if you could actually now start showing us what, because I read about fire starters from your website. There was a specific blog post about it, and the image, it's very abstract when you talk about it, but to see it in action was so helpful to me.
So can you see my slides?
No, not yet. If you click down there should be a share button.
Yeah, hold on. Got it.
And then I can share it. There you go. Yes. Now go to the slides, because otherwise you get the tunnel of doom. There you go.
Okay, so here we go. If you are interested, I have a bunch of other free stuff that I am actually giving away online. If you follow the Linktree link that's there, or you take a peek at or zoom over and click into that QR code. I'm going to share a bunch of stuff with you today, but oftentimes people want to see full-blown lessons or units or have access to things that help them contextualize this work even more. And you'll find that there. So often when we talk about multimodal composition or bringing different modes of expression into a writing workshop, the conversation is around the production of something that is multimodal, like what you see here, an infographic. We'll have a lot of people talking about things like comics or magazines or zines or websites or podcasts. And so many people have been sharing incredible stuff around all of these different sorts of products that students can create in K-12 classrooms. The work that I want to share with you and the ideas that I want to share with you today are really about making the process of writing more multimodal. And it looks like this in my world. So these are actual photos that I have permission to share from my own studios and workshops. And in that upper left-hand corner, those are some of my students from one of my courses on campus this year. I teach at Damon University. And so the process, when we make it more multimodal, invites the use of loose parts in the form of things like Play-Doh or Lego or clay or stickers or buttons, or natural elements like pine cones or leaves. There you see some paint chips there.
Okay, which looks so different than the outline or the 5-paragraph essay. Thank God. Yeah.
But what I really want you to look at is when you look at all of these pictures, do you still see structure there?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's
trying to make sense
there.
of it.
Yeah. And so structure really matters. And when I'm using these approaches in my own classroom, we start by looking at examples of the things we want to create. If we want to create a multimodal story, we'll look at examples of stories and we will define the structure. If we want to create a website or we want to create an infographic, we will study examples of those and tease out the conventions of that form. What makes an infographic an infographic? What makes a story or an argument an argument? And a piece of that is the structure. So if you look at that photo in the center, right next to the title in the bottom, you'll see that this particular writer actually is working within the structure of the form that he's trying to create. It has 4 pieces, and he's using loose parts to represent what will be put in each of those pieces. The beautiful thing about this is they're able to design a piece very rapidly, and they're not getting stuck on trying to figure out how to spell a word or say a word or whether the word is the right word. It's all very oral and it's all very manipulative at this point, but it is intentional and there is structure here. It's not a free-for-all. So beginning with examples or mentor texts is really important. Teasing out their conventions and especially their structure. That defines the whole of a lesson. So an entire lesson is about inviting students to make what it is they intend to write and to transition to print before they walk out the door. And I'll speak a little bit more about that as we move on. But as we move forward, I want to focus on the very first part of the lesson with all of you today. We're going to make a little bit of writing together by playing with something that I call a fire starter. Materials are going to matter here. So what I'm going to do is give you just 2 minutes, all of you, no matter where you are, look around the room that you're in and gather yourself some loose parts. What are some things that you can pick up?
I love this.
All right, here I go.
Okay.
All right. So I'm in my kitchen right now, so I might open my kitchen, the drawers in here and grab some spoons. I also have in this room, I have some different tiny little jars that are here. I have the keys to my car. Anything that's loose that you can gather quickly and put in front of you. Don't make judgments. Just grab it.
I'm a passport. The Apple charger.
All right.
Give you just a few more seconds. I'm going to count you down. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right. So fire starters matter inside of the lessons that I teach when I am supporting multimodal composition. Here's the formula that I typically use. Given X, some sort of materials, and Y, a time constraint, how might you make Z, whatever concept it is we're working on that day? So it might look like this. Given the loose parts of your life that you just gathered very rapidly, in the next 3 minutes, how might you make a metaphor for hope? And I can tell you that what I have in front of me is there are lemons on the counter. I'm right next to my sink faucet. So I have access to water that I could put in a cup. I also have some teeny tiny succulents on the window ledge right in front of me. And I have some flowers that are behind me on my table. These are all loose parts of my life right now. So I'm challenging you to try this. Given the loose parts of your own life in the next 3 minutes, how might you make a metaphor for hope? Go ahead and take that time. And I'm going to stop you at 12:23 Eastern Standard Time.
Okay, so quick question, because again, I'm old school with the constraints. Should I be writing something, or am I just thinking?
I just want you to make it with these materials.
Okay, metaphor for hope. All righty. I feel like we should have background.
That's what I was using.
Da, 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 da. Oh, nobody needs to hear me singing on.
About halfway through.
Okay, and I hope, and if you are at home and you have done this, please go ahead and do it. And then I hope you're engaged in doing hands-on as well.
I'm going to share my example in about 1 minute.
Okay.
About 30 seconds.
That is not going to balance. I was like trying to get all. I wish I'd like duct tape, sticky tape or something, but this all comes crashing down.
All right. So I'd love for some of you to have a conversation either with me or with the people that are near you. I want to talk a little bit about the metaphor that you made. So for example, I might say that hope is a spoon, which is to say that it's sturdy, that we take it for granted sometimes, that we keep it in a drawer and only pull it out when it's necessary. Hope is a spoon because it helps us lift messy things. It also feeds us. I want you to play with the metaphor that you created a little bit as well. And Taylor Molly is the one who conceptualized this metaphorical frame. So start with hope, compare it to whatever you built, and then try to tease out the features. Hope is a spoon, which is to say it's sturdy. We take it for granted. We keep it in a drawer. We may feel it's unnecessary most days, but then it helps us lift messy things and it feeds us. I would love to hear some examples. If people are willing to share them, I'm going to stop sharing my screen for a minute in order to do that.
And please, in the comments, share that metaphor as well, please.
Yeah.
All right, Tony, you're up. I'm sorry, I'm in charge. So you
putting her on the spot.
Okay, so these are my things I grabbed. I'm in my husband's office. So we have a #1 dad trophy, of course, an empty snack cup in my husband's office, and a chip clip and like a binder clip. So I was thinking hope is a dad who fills the empty void and keeps things together.
And so you made the decision to connect all of your pieces together instead of just choosing one, which is it's really cool. That's interesting.
Okay. But you can do it multiple ways, obviously.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And I don't think that you really want to be selecting for writers how they are moving through that cognitive task. You want to give them just enough constraint that they're productive, but not so much that you're doing the thinking and the writing for them. Yeah.
Okay. What I love about this is that it was tangible. You know, you tell some kids, oh, I need you to come up with a metaphor, and it's completely abstract. And now, you know, this is hands-on tangible. So it's funny. I'm going to be like Tony, and I grabbed my little succulent and I grabbed a book. But there are two things in my office. One is my Ohio candle. Smells like home when I'm homesick because I'm in California. I live in California now. And my husband has these, it's a telephone insulator. Remember from the telephone poles? Mm-hmm. So I'm going to go with light. So, or like, hope is about light.
Yeah. And then if you were going to tease out, if you were going to tease out the criteria, you could get real specific about the features of those two objects. You might speak to their shape, how they work with light, their color, the way they smell, like all of those things.
I see what you're doing.
Hope is a compass.
I see what you're doing.
Provides direction. Yeah. Beautiful.
You're having the conversation. So again, in traditional writing back in the day, you'd look at the kid's paragraph and you'd say, okay, well, there's a comment, but what's your idea? You're trying so hard to pull it out of them because it's so difficult. And now you're having this conversation with me saying, okay, now you're really helping me articulate what I want to say. So, hope is,
so you can start with the general thing, like right here, hope is like a shoe. It helps us move through the rough and the hard. And if I were going to peek over your shoulder and look into your work, I might push you then to look at that shoe and zoom in on specific things about it. Look at the sole of the shoe. Look at the laces of the shoe. How might you work that into and start to extend the metaphor? Hope is a mirror, which is to say it's seeing your best future. So think about the mirror, zoom in on its features, pay attention to the frame or the edges around it, the shape of it, the size of it. Brainstorm out as many of those features as you can. And that can help you begin to extend the metaphor and then start to transition in a way that you start to frame out a full piece of really impressive writing. I'm going back to sharing my screen so that I can tease that out a little bit further.
Tony, I already... You're gonna be using that like day one, right?
I know. Well, I like how you extend their thinking even more and get them to really critically think. Like, oh, let's take, like how you mentioned, like the mirror features of the frame. Like, let's look, or even I thought of the shoe and like the eyelets, like of the shoelaces. Like, what do those all mean?
And you're going to need to play with it a little bit and think it through. And so here I just sort of started spilling a lot of ideas around the features of a spoon and what I know about the character of a spoon. I may not keep all of these ideas for the piece that I end up writing, but it's giving me good fodder to work with. That's really uncommon. It's interesting, it's intriguing, and it can delight a reader and surprise them so that we're not just talking about the general. And to that end, you might remember that I started with these general objects that a lot of people might find in their kitchen, but I decided to work with the spoon because a spoon is something you wouldn't really compare to hope. How is hope a spoon? That's so odd. That's so weird, but that's the kind of writing we want young people to do. And transcription really matters. Transcription is where we start to talk about it aloud and people start to share back with us what we said. We can also use video this way. And I do all the time with my students while they are making things and engaging in making writing, they will video record what they are doing. They'll video record themselves saying aloud what it is they hope to produce with print. There is a significant amount of evidence to show that when writers have the opportunity to view those videos back, to watch themselves, to hear themselves say aloud what they intend to put down in print, that transition to writing is much more successful for them. And so all of these things matter. Fire starters matter, materials matter, but transcription really matters as well. And this is the difference between designing a lesson or a unit that's focused on creating a multimodal product and instead understanding that making the process of writing multimodal as well is really a critical part of serving young writers well. One of the things that I'm sharing with you, which we can talk a little bit about more, it's on the last page of the slides. And if you do have that slide deck, and I think my friends here are going to share that with you in the chat. If you have my slide deck, it links you on this page to something called the MakeWriting Starter Set. And that looks like this. And if you open it up, you're going to notice that it is about 50 pages long. And what you'll find inside are very explicit how-tos, including how you might prepare yourself to make writing in your own classroom, moving through the analysis of structure and defining the structures that you might use with young writers. And then also there's a lot of support in here around the use of fire starters. So there's materials here as well, but I've given you dozens and dozens and dozens of fire starter prompts that you can use with young writers that are actually aligned to the different forms of writing that we tend to focus on most in English language arts as well as others. So I have stopped sharing my screen here, and I'm happy to answer questions or tell you more. But hopefully this gives you a little bit of something to latch onto so that you can take it back to your classrooms and try this work right away.
Yeah, I can't even, to me, that's just simple brilliance.
Oh,
I mean, that's
so
the term for it.
Oh,
Because
yeah, I could have done that in first grade, but I just didn't know. This was amazing. I'm like, I can write.
Well, that's kind of what happened in my world, right? Like I was working in my writing studio, and often, as you might imagine, these are summer programs. At least we start there. Parents would enroll students, their children, because they were worried that they didn't like to write. And I'm running, kind of an old school writing workshop, very print heavy, very print based. And if you read MakeWriting, then you know that I met a little boy in that workshop who was showing up crying every day. And we were writing stories, and I'm trying to drag him uphill into my world. And what was really, I think, very arrogant of me was to assume that this child couldn't write a story because he couldn't produce it with written words. And it's the same bias that we impose upon students who are seniors in high school, students who are freshmen and sophomores in college. Even I have a former student who graduated and is eager to pursue a PhD program and eager to get published, and really is very, very print comfortable. But because I never did a good enough job teaching multimodal composition explicitly in my own classroom, maybe wasn't as confident transitioning that written work into a multimodal form, like a video or an infographic or an Instagram post or something that might show up more visually on social media, which is where a lot of people are choosing to consume things right now. And so it's really important, and it's been a huge education for me.
So when I read your blog post about fire starters, again, you can just, search it on Angela's blog. I think, Manny, we have a link there to the actual fire starters. Again, it was very hard for me to visualize it. So now you call it a creative constraint, and I didn't get it. Now I get it, because it is, I think, if you're just gathering supplies or gathering the things, you don't really understand how it's all going to connect. So you providing is that what you mean by creative constraint? Sort of.
Yeah, I think that, that language around the use of creative constraint comes from the world, I believe, of design thinking. Dan Ryder uses similar descriptions.
Yes, he does.
Well, yeah. And what it really has to do with is that this isn't a free-for-all. And often I think anyone who has taught English language arts or taught any sort of more creative sort of process has had the experience of telling students that they can do whatever they want with whatever they want, and students coming back and saying, I have no idea what to do. Right. It's like you've thrown them in the ocean without any sort of boat to latch onto. Right. Creative constraint, in my world, there are different things that we create constraints around. We can create constraints around the structure of the form, the amount of time we're giving students, the materials or the modes of expression that we're asking them to use. It can be incredibly powerful to help learners define their own constraints. So for instance, if a writer comes to me and says, I want to create a TikTok video, I'll say, go look at 4 or 5 examples of the kind of TikTok video you want to create, and come back to me and tell me what their conventions are. What makes a TikTok video a TikTok video? Mm-hmm. They're already starting to create constraints for themselves. I'm working with a writer who says, I need to create a resume or a cover letter. Go find 5 examples that you would like to replicate or that you think are high quality. What are the conventions of that? You're already starting to create the constraints that you live within. Constraints actually foster creativity. They help us make decisions. So we're going from really divergent thinking, which is fabulous. I have all of these ideas and options, to more emergent thinking, these are the possibilities, and then we start to evaluate them before we choose one. That's a really important concept to understand, that transition from divergent to emergent to convergent thinking. When I was teaching in my own classroom, I would either go straight to convergent thinking by giving kids really tight constraints. This is the exact thing I want you to write about. Mm-hmm. Or we would rush them through the divergent process, and we would have them choose topics too fast or choose materials too fast. That floundering that happens inside of the divergent part of the process is important, and making sure that we're asking good questions so that writers are generating a lot of ideas and a lot of possibilities. Those questions can be really good fodder for that.
How can we add videos to it? Because we were going to run out of time. This was the last question that I had.
Videos are a really useful fire starter tool because you can use videos as an impetus, as a challenge. Instead of me using slides today, I could have used a video and taken you on a video tour of my kitchen and the materials that I was gathering. I could have shared a video of how I was actually creating my own metaphor for hope, right? I will tell you, though, one of my favorite ways to use video, and I think that Edpuzzle could be really powerful here, is to have young writers actually videotape their own builds and the things that they create, and to talk aloud about what it means, right? And that is incredible. It offers an incredible opportunity for them to not only make their thinking and their intentions explicit, but begin to analyze them and become really metacognitive about the work that they're doing.
To have them have that as a record of what they've done, because, sometimes words are vapor and we forget what we've come up with. I was also thinking of using video, again, for a teacher, for our kids who are still in remote situations, or students who are absent but still want to participate. I was thinking, providing a video like you did, gathering the supplies, putting it in a video, saying, okay, here's what you've got, within constraints, those creative constraints, what can you come up with? So doing it that way too, from the teacher point of view, providing that video recording for absent students, like I said, for sick students, for remote students, for students who might just need to be able to rewatch it.
Yeah, absolutely.
I've done some Edpuzzles before. Like, we teach the kite runner to our seniors, and we have them watch just short little things about what kite running is in that culture in Afghanistan, and a little video of Khaled Hosseini talking about his own upbringing to get them understanding the concept that they're just about to read about. So, and then they respond to certain questions, and then we show the responses. We ask the questions that they pose to. But I like the video thing we've used before, or I've used before, and our team of teachers. Yeah. But I like the idea of now adding even more to the repertoire that we can have in the classroom to aid in this discussion. And I really like the talking of thinking and talk it out.
Yeah. Tony, I mean, not even just to use a fire starter to generate initial thinking, but using a fire starter to answer even a question about theme. Right, Angela? Don't you think?
Absolutely, yeah. I call them fire starters because they're quick and they're manageable. They're small. So often as teachers, we try to build a bonfire right out of the gate, and it just keeps snuffing out, right? But fire starters are like these little small pieces of twigs and wood and a little bit of something that catches fire really quickly. So if we can make the challenge small, the time small, the material small, and we just sort of throw it out there. It doesn't matter whether it comes at the beginning of the lesson or the end of the lesson, and they can be used for all sorts of purposes. But what really makes them useful and powerful is the micro nature of them. They ignite a lot of thinking. They empower kids quickly. They build confidence. They help them kind of put the print aside long enough to generate ideas that are really complex and uncommon. And that's really what you want to achieve.
So I think that's kind of where a good place to end it for today. Angela, thank you so
Thanks
much
for having me. This was so
Thank
much fun.
you.
The fire starter idea, the creative constraints, and multimodal writing. I know if you want to do a quick 30 seconds, you want to promote your books that you've got coming out.
So MakeWriting was the first in a series. Every book that I've written has sort of demonstrated how my thinking and my practice is evolving. MakeWriting was really an experimental conversation that I kind of wanted to pitch out there. Like, hey, has anyone thought of this stuff before? And so much of it is still relevant and still remains. But if you want to see how my thinking has evolved, if you hop into my Linktree, and I think I shared the link. You can drop it in the chat if you want.
I've posted everything again.
I really appreciate it. The Linktree actually has a ton of other free content on it. So if you're interested in units or lessons or resources, you'll find them there. But all of my new books are there too. And I hope that everybody will reach out to me as you're experimenting.
Please do. Like I'm seeing in the comments, so many people saying I'm going to do this. So here, please, I'm begging you, as you do this, I know it's June, but when you get back to the classroom, please share out those creations. Take video, take pictures, share it out, use the hashtag Angela on
Tag
Twitter,
us.
use the hashtag, tag Edpuzzle and hashtag Edpuzzle Live, so that others can benefit from what we've all learned here today. So I wish you all a very happy Saturday, wherever you are.
You too.
Might be Sunday for some of you. I know someone's in the late, but be sure to follow Edpuzzle, follow Angela, Tony, Manny, follow us on social media. Keep up so that you can keep up with more of our live events that we have coming up, and we will see you next time. Thank you so much for being here, everyone.
Hi, guys.
Thank you.